To war or not to war? That is the question. And people are lining up on really weird sides on this one. Hey, everybody, I'm Steve Green, Bill Whittle, and Scott Ott. This is Right Angle, brought to you by the members of BillWhittle.com. So, you probably know that last week Iran attacked a couple of oil tankers in the Persian Gulf, and then late Thursday, downed an unmanned U.S. spy drone worth $150, $200 million. You know, these things aren't cheap. And apparently President Trump almost launched a strike on the Islamic Republic on Friday and then called it off at the last minute. And instead, I kind of love this, went with a cyber attack. I want to read you this intro from the New York Times, Scott. United States Cyber Command, by the way, it's just awesome that we have a cyber command. On Thursday, conducted online. Oh, I'm sorry, I got the date wrong. On Thursday, conducted online attacks against an Iranian intelligence group that American officials believe helped plan the attacks against oil tankers in recent weeks. According to people briefed on the operation, the intrusion occurred the same day President Trump called off a strike on Iranian targets like radar and missile batteries. But the online operation was allowed to go forward because it was intended to be below the threshold of armed conflict, using the same shadow tactics that Iran has employed. Scott, let's start with you. We were kind of on the same boat watching candidate Trump sort of ignore and even sometimes disdain foreign policy. But what do you think of his actions over these last few days?
I'm just trying to figure out what kind. First of all, the idea that we're announcing cyber attacks seems a little strange to me. It's like, it's one thing to say, well, you know, the troops landed on the beach of Normandy yesterday morning and began the taking back of Europe. Yeah. But it's like we launched a cyber attack. The head of the Iranian Islamic Republican Guard actually had 6,000 of the Amazon deal of the day ordered and sent to his address. You know, with his own hacked credit card. So, yeah, I know that this is the new world and I'm barely in it. But it does seem, I mean, obviously the president is known for his negotiating savvy. And so you have to kind of give him a wide berth here and say, does he understand something I don't understand? No matter what you think of his tactics, he has been somewhat successful in getting what he wants over the years by using his negotiating tactics. I heard some audio of the president talking he plays this double game. On the one hand, he's like, we're going to turn you into a cinder. You're just going to be a smoldering heap of garbage, but you have a fabulous future ahead of you. All you have to do is give up your nuclear ambitions, stop funding terrorism around the world, and it's a fabulous, fabulous future. I can't remember the actual word he was using, but it was something akin to the word fabulous. But over and over again, he kept talking about what a great future the Iranian people could have and their government could have. And I thought, that's pretty brilliant. And he did the same thing with the North Koreans with a famous, showing them a video of beachfront property off of whatever the coast of North Korea is. I like this sort of carrot and stick technique, and I'm willing to give him some time to bring that to bear. I am mystified by whether they're leaks or intentional disclosures of information about things like the president saying, oh, by the way, I was going to launch an attack, but I just want to let you know I didn't launch the attack because a few minutes before I did it, my generals told me a bunch of people would be killed. And now saying, oh, yeah, we launched a cyber attack. My preference in military matters like this and in operations is just absolute radio silence.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. I thought the president's reaction last week was absolutely pitch perfect. The only thing I would have changed is he announced on, I guess it was Thursday or maybe it was Friday morning, that he called off the airstrikes because the downing of our drone didn't measure up to the level of taking kinetic action against Iran. Those are my words, not his. And I thought that by doing that, he told Iran where the line is, what line it is they can come right up to without having to suffer some sort of massive retaliation. And that's one of those things where maybe it would be wiser just to leave a little more strategic ambiguity there. But that's a really very mild criticism for what could have been a very dangerous couple of days here last week. But you won't believe, actually maybe you will, Bill, believe some of these critiques coming from the left and from the never Trump folks. Eric Boehlert, the famous progressive writer, says, how the press played along with Trump's Iran crisis charade, which I tried reading the piece, and it did not match up with anything that I'd seen in the press, and I gave up. Salon, that bastion of sanity in a crazy world, asks, did the Saudis urge Trump to call off planned strike against Iran? And never Trumper Tom Nichols, who I used to follow this guy on Twitter and read him every day, but he's just gotten increasingly unhinged, says, as usual, even when his administration manages to do something right, it does so in the most damaging way possible. Bill, can you believe the people beating the war drums on this?
Well, yes, this is Trump Derangement Syndrome, the definition of which is the sacrifice of any other principles you might have, no matter what the circumstances and no matter what intensity, so long as you get to stick it to Trump. It's amazing, really, how whenever anything goes wrong, his tendrils spread across the earth. But whenever anything goes right, he's a mere puppet being manipulated by forces
Yes.
greater than himself. So enough about the reaction to this, which is going to be negative no matter what happens. I'm a little more interested in the actual response and the actual dynamics of what happened. The first thing that needs to be said again and again and again and again until we're blue in the face is that this idea of starting a war with Iran it's just a non sequitur. Iran has been at war with this country since 1979.
Yep.
They've been killing Americans since 1979, been funding all of these terrorist operations that kill Americans. They put most of the IEDs that killed most of our people in Iraq and some of them in Afghanistan straight from Iran. So to say that we should be careful about war with Iran is to immediately buy into the principle that we're not already. We may not be at war with Iran, but Iran has been at war with us and been at war with us for a long time. So the question is, at what point do you decide are you gonna do something about this? I think certainly mining waters and shooting down a drone is an act of war, and I think there should have been a military response. Now, maybe 150 people, maybe that's maybe more than he really thought that the situation would warrant. But Steve, you've got kids, so do you, Scott. When you tell a kid you cannot have any cookies, and then that kid reaches up and gets the cookie jar and starts to undo the cookie jar, and you continue to say, what did I just say? What did I just tell you? If you eat that, I swear to God, all right, look, 2 cookies and that, and you eat another cookie, and I mean it, we're going to turn this car around. Okay, look. When you do this, what is the kid doing when you tell a kid you cannot have a cookie and then it goes and takes the cookie anyway? What's it doing? This is a serious question. I'd like your answer as a parent.
Oh, as a parent, I slap their hand. I mean, I don't have to because I did
What
it
is
one
the
time.
motivation? What is the motivation?
He's trying to find out
for
how
the
far
kid?
he can go and whether he can get away with what he wanted to. And if you will, frankly, if he can wear you out. But Bill, the argument could be flipped around and say, well, isn't that exactly what is happening the other way? Because the Iranians shot down a drone, but they didn't shoot down the jet that had people in it. There was a surveillance craft in the area, and maybe America is testing the boundaries by sending a drone nearby.
That's like saying you tell a kid not to take a cookie. Then the kid not only takes a cookie, he takes the cake as well. It's completely irrelevant to the issue. They are doing what any other child does, and I'm not saying they're doing it out of childishness. I'm saying they're doing it out of the kind of culture that produces that's a dominance-based culture. You have cooperative cultures like America and Canada. We don't have too many problems with shooting down each other's drones or materials or anything like that. And then you've got dominance-based cultures like Iran and Iraq and all the rest. And so they have to know what the limits are in terms of what they can get away with. And they are like a kid in the back seat of the car poking his sister and trying to find out at what point is Dad going to stop the car and turn the car around. And to be perfectly honest with you, we have trained them very well to believe that at no point is Dad ever going to stop the car and turn this car around. There is nothing that they can do that will cause us to respond in that way. When anybody who has kids, or certainly anybody who understands the entire concept of parenthood, understands that if you tell a child that you cannot reach for that cookie and that child reaches for that cookie, That exact instant is when your authority as a parent is on the line forever. What you do in that moment is going to determine whether your kid grows up to be a drug addict or somebody who accomplishes something great in life. They are going to know what that limit is. This is precisely what the Iranians are doing. And by the way, I got accused of warmongering about this because of the need to launch a strike on Iran. You can't just put mines in international waters and shoot down American property over international airspace. You can't do it. And so when I talk about a strike, I'm talking about the kind of things that we've invested a fair amount of money in. I'm talking about a couple of Los Angeles class subs putting a couple of Tomahawk land attack missiles in the air and knocking out a couple of anti-aircraft radars or something like that. And I'm talking about doing this like everybody else who's in the military and like everybody else who understands this dynamic, like every single person I ever met that understood this dynamic in and out of the military. I'm talking about striking Iran not because I want war, but because I want peace. I know that this is not going to end until it is clear to them they can no longer continue this one-sided war against America. And when we're ready to make that point clear enough, we'll make that point clear enough. And as Ulysses S. Grant said a couple times during the Civil War, maybe we should stop worrying so much about what Robert E. Lee's going to do to us and start figuring out what we're going to do to him. Now, bring some guns up here. This is the attitude that Trump seems to have, that we absolutely need. And the idea that the president was reined in at the last minute as the jets were taking off by his humanitarian concerns is a smart play locally, domestically. If it was enough of a message to Iran, we'll find out, and we'll find out soon. I suspect the poking is going to continue, and I suspect the hand's going to keep reaching into the cookie jar.
Yeah, let me explain why I disagree with Bill, which works up really well to what I actually wanted to say in my conclusion. You know, President Reagan sent the Iranian Navy in, 1987 or 88, Operation Praying Mantis, I think it was. And that didn't change Iranian behavior one bit. Honestly, the only thing that's going to change anything in Iran is going to be regime change, but there's no way I'm going to advocate going in like we did in Iraq. The big mistake I made...
Me neither.
Pardon?
No, me neither.
Oh,
Sorry,
yeah.
I'm just speaking out loud.
The big mistake I made thinking Iraq going into Iraq might be a good idea is I thought that the 9/11 attacks had given the Americans the strategic patience to deal with a long-term project like Iraq. I said it would take 50 years. We gave it 9 and wasted half of those. And so, unless our national existence is at stake, I'm simply not going to advocate any sort of large-scale military action, because you don't just go to war with the military you have, you go to war with the people you have, and Americans were fairly impatient for this kind of thing. That said, Iran has a box that it can play in, essentially, and we kept that box fairly small through the use of sanctions since 1979. President Obama gave them a much bigger box to play in by turning over billions of dollars to them, in the dead of night, pallets full of cash and all the rest, and by turning a blind eye to this kind of thing. What President Trump is doing is shrinking the size of the box that the Iranians have to play in. And the thing you don't want to do is bring about a regime change that would alter the pro-American sentiment of the Iranian people. I think that long term, I think that's our biggest asset in Iran, is a new regime someday going to continue the sentiment of the actual Iranian people, which tends to be pro-American, or are we going to trigger some anti-American nationalist monster that might actually be worse than the current Islamic Republic? So keep shrinking the size of that box, engage in cyber attacks, continue squeezing them with sanctions, and for God's sake, keep fracking in Texas, keep fracking in North Dakota. We should be fracking in New York. Drive the price of oil down. Shrink the box that they have to play in. And the louder they clang against the sides, the more that we know that the end is nigh. I believe that more responses like we've seen this last week, the Iranian regime as we know it might not survive 4 more years of Trump, and that's foreign policy-wise, which I thought was going to be his real weak suit in his first term. Foreign policy-wise, he's turning into a very, very pleasant surprise. So more like this, Mr. President, and Keep shrinking that box. This has been Right Angle with Bill Whittle and Scott Ott. I'm Steve Green. This has been brought to you by the members of BillWhittle.com. If you like shows like this, please click over, become a member. You could become one of our producers. That's right, you could be making this stuff too. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.